right, so for those of you who were away yesterday, we went through an example monologue and we looked at basically the structure, we looked at the thoughts and feelings that were included, the aesthetic devices, and the structural features that are needed. So this monologue it is slightly over the word count, but the word count used to be slightly larger. So it's probably about 150 words too many, but this was relevant to the task when it was written. So, ignoring that, the purpose of me showing you this monologue is that it shows you some good development in the thoughts and feelings. It shows you some good reflection points and it shows you the structure. Now, this was a 25 out of 25, so it did receive top marks. So, this is to show you sort of what you would be looking at if you're trying to achieve that. So, remember with monologues, they start in the present and then they reflect on past events. Now, when we read through this, we can tell where it's set, but also the thoughts and feelings of the character at that point in time. So I've also written a little blurb up the top here of the setting just to give a little bit of context to the monologue. So this monologue is Max Vandenberg. He's just left Hans, Liesel, and Rosa after it's become too dangerous to stay with them. And he's in the forest hiding and trying to think of where to go next. So this is a gap that has been filled, and the silence is Max's voice and opinion and what he reveals about how he feels, because we don't really get that much from him about his thoughts and feelings. So you can see that there are some stage directions here in bold and in brackets. So it tells us what it should look like. So this is also very helpful when it comes to reading a written monologue, because it shows you things like anguished pain on their face, or where they're actually walking and what they're physically doing. So we'll read this first paragraph. So this does not feel real. Leaving them does not feel real. Maybe I should go back. No, it is for their own good. My heart aches. I do not know what to do, where to go, what to feel. I wish I could go back to the basement, to the words, to Liesel's stories. I want to read to my Liesel one last time, but I cannot. I put them in danger, and now I must pay the price. I cannot risk the Nazis hurting them. I should have left earlier. They risk so much. For me, I should have put them first. I should have put Mutter first. So this is the German word for mother. Now, there's a lot of shorter, sharper sentences, and there are even some ellipses used here to indicate the train of thought drifting off, or moving on to something else. Or I wish I could go back. Obviously shows you some regret there as well. So it's important that the characters don't say, I feel sad, or I feel regretful, or I feel guilty. You need to be able to show it through the words that they use. So you can tell that Max here is feeling really uncertain about his choices, that things have changed so rapidly for him. He says, this does not feel real. Leaving them does not feel real. So he's struggling to grasp his reality. Maybe I should go back is, showing that self-questioning, showing that, he might be uncertain about the choices that he's made. You've got some short sentences. No. Okay. That there is him talking to himself in his thoughts going, no, I can't do that. That's silly. That, this is for their own good. So varying those things is really important. Those sentences is really important. I wish I could go back shows some confusion and anguish and longing. He calls to, I want to read to my Liesel. Calling her my Liesel indicates that sort of familiar connection between them. He sees her as part of his family by indicating that she's my Liesel, kind of like a sister. Okay, so another thing that's really important is I don't want you to use contractions, because in this particular time period, people didn't say can't and don't. They would say cannot and do not. They would speak in a more formalized manner. And it also fits with the English as a second language kind of aspect of the characters too. So try to avoid contractions. Things like wouldn't would become would not. So this here is in the present. It's where he is, how he's feeling at that point in time. Now, he does have some present tense sentences in the reflection part in the middle, but the majority of it is set in the past. And the reason why there are some present tense sentences is because it's indicating how he's feeling at the moment in which he's reflecting on things that happened in the past. So the weight of leaving Mutter will never leave me. So it left a hole in my heart that I do not think can ever be recovered. When I walk out the door, I remember. And when I walked out the door, I remember. So this here indicates, so he's reflecting on what happened in the past. So we've used sentence starters here. When I walked shows past. I remember I felt shows past as well. So I remember I felt as if I was burying her already, digging a grave for my heart. Now, he's obviously not literally digging a grave for his heart. He would be dead then. So this here is some imagery that we've included because Max, we know, has a way with words and he likes to describe things using similes, metaphors, and imagery. So I would expect that that would be in a monologue for Max. I did not think I would ever feel love again until the Hubermans. So he's connecting, right, his love for his mother and leaving her to the Hubermans. And then the overarching sort of idea about this monologue is abandonment and loss and hurt and regret of, you know, how he left his mum, and then he goes and leaves Liesl, who's another important person to him. So those ideas are connected in here. So Mama pushed me out the door to meet a fate that would have me leaving Liesl, abandoning again, running, hiding, alone. So you can have single word sentences as well for emphasis and impact. And then it obviously says what he's doing at that time, sits down at the base of a tree deep in the forest. But no matter how much I call for Mama now, she will not come. So we've gone from calling her my Mutter to Mama, which makes it a little more personal and shows that he's becoming a bit more vulnerable. That door is shut. It's not a literal door. He's talking about the opportunity. So therefore he's using a metaphor here. Her and the rest of my family are gone like dust in the wind. Impossible to hold. Suffering through what I chose to run away from. See how the word chose is in italics? That shows emphasis on that particular word as well, which is important. And he rubs his hands on his face. If only I could tell my family how much I miss them all. They're all gone. I am alone. Running is all I know how to do now. I guess some things never change. So here we get an overall feeling that he feels regret, that he feels shame, that he feels like he has some sort of guilt because he chose to run away from the suffering and the rest of his family faced the consequences and weren't able to escape. So there's a little bit of survivor's guilt coming through here. Now it introduces a symbol. The stars are also a reoccurring sort of symbol that are within the film, and he's talking about the stars being his only comfort. When I look at them, I'm reminded of home, simpler times with my parents, laying on our backs, looking to the night sky, home under the stars. So remember, motif and symbolism are important to have in your monologue. Motif are reoccurring ideas and themes or reoccurring dominant ideas. So abandonment, loss, freedom, those sorts of things are reoccurring. Symbols that reoccur are, the accordion, soccer ball, books, stars, light and dark, those sorts of things. So if you weave those throughout your monologue, that's where you're addressing the aesthetic features and stylistic devices. So he talks about stars being his comfort, and then he's reminded of home. So that gives context to why he's so happy in that moment when he's outside looking at the stars, when everybody else in Heaven Street is hiding from the bombs in the air raid shelter, and he feels the most free he has for a long time. It reminds him of home, which is something that he's longing for because of that loss of home. He's lost his family, he's lost his home, he's lost his freedom. So this was a glimpse of getting that back there, and he's reminiscing and thinking about that, the simpler times. So he says, I remember when Heaven Street emptied with the sound of sirens ripping through the quiet night. It was my first time out in years. I relished the sight of the stars like small children relish their sugar cubes. So he's referencing sugar cubes, which is what Liesl had in the film. Heaven Street, obviously the name of the street that they live on. Liesl's weather reports were right. The moon looked exactly like a silver oyster, those bright lights twinkling in the sky. Freedom. Now, we know he called them weather reports, and we know that this is directly from the film, that the moon looked exactly like a silver oyster, because that's what Liesl described it as. As dark as it is out here, I still have the stars to act as my blanket. So again, bringing up stars and the fact that stars remind him of home, of simpler times with his family, and they remind him of safety and comfort. Okay. But this blanket can only ward off the dark thoughts in my mind. I cannot ward off the chilling cold of the German nights. So it brings it back to reality where he actually is. He's in the cold. He's out trying to find shelter, trying to find survival, trying to escape. And it links again because we've talked about the chilling cold of German nights, and then it goes into cold again and what literal cold reminds him of. So the cold reminds me of sickness and hunger, of cold hands and even colder hearts. But the frost melted on my first Christmas. Now, he's not talking about the real frost because we know that at Christmas they're actually throwing snowballs and things like that. So it didn't melt. He's talking about the frost in his heart. So when he left his mother, he would have closed himself up a bit because of that loss and that guilt and shame that he felt, that he probably didn't feel as though that he deserved love. So he shut himself off from that. When he met Liesl and the Hubermans, that love sort of re-sparked and reignited, particularly around his first Christmas, which is one of his most fond memories. So when I saw the bright look on Liesl's face and the way she giggled as she threw another snowball, it felt like I was home. So home here and relationships with people is also a reoccurring idea or motif within this monologue too. Somehow Liesl managed to turn the most frigid of winters into the warmest of memories. She melted my frosty heart. I can still feel the sting of a snowball hitting my face. So lots of imagery here. And Hans with a bucket on his head. He was always a child at heart. So this shows a reflective, positive, happy mood, thinking about a moment of enjoyment in time when things weren't great in his life. So he's holding on to this memory. It's sort of reflecting on the time period in which he started to discover his love for people again. And starting to let go of some of the guilt that he felt in that moment in time and allowed himself to feel happy. Hans was right when he told me I had been missing out. Now he's talking about how he wishes he could celebrate Christmas with them every year. So that sort of longing for, going back to the familiar is there. And then again, he falls a little bit into sadness, but now the dream is flickered out like a dying star. Now he's starting to reflect on actually leaving Liesl. So again, guilt and shame come up here. I will never forget the look on Liesl's face. I was another person to leave. She seemed defeated. She clung to me like a desperate child because that is what she was. I told her I would never leave, that I would never abandon her like everyone else had. But I did. To keep her safe. She saved me. I was not lying when I told her that words are life. Words are life, and her words saved mine. If it was not for Liesl and her words, I'm not sure I ever would have survived the sickness. So he's reflecting on how hard it was, how difficult it was to leave her. But in the end, he did it because he wanted to keep her safe, to repay the favor because she saved him by showing him how to love again, and showing him how to trust and being there to support him through his sickness. So again, this is reflecting on in the past, and it reveals what he felt in that moment because we don't actually know that from the movie. Though it was freezing in the basement, my heart remained warm. The Hubermans felt like family. They were family. So again, the reoccurring idea of family and home. I now know that my father made the right choice by trusting Hans on the battlefield. I will miss Hans's accordion, Liesl's reading, and even Rosa's sharp tongue. They gave me a place when I had none, a home when I abandoned mine, a family when I had no one left. They saved me. I left them to protect them. So he's starting to realize, he's starting to understand that he did leave them and he does feel guilty for that. And he is upset that Liesel probably doesn't really understand, but his intentions are to protect them, to pay back the favor because they saved him and he wants to do the same. And now I am alone again, nowhere to go, no one to go with. I have to make a promise to myself, a promise to them. So this is where he starts to come to some sort of realization of what he actually needs to do. There needs to be some purpose for him going forward. So this is revealing that I will survive this darkness and I will find them in the light. Now, obviously, not the literal darkness and not the literal light. He's talking about the darkness of the war and the despair that he has to go through, and the light, as in the light at the end of the tunnel and the war. Okay? So that one day, whether it be 2 weeks or 2 years from now, I will find my way back to them. So, emphasis. This is where you get more marks as well. You've got emphasis on particular words, you put them in italics. I owe it to Liesel to survive at the very least. Someday, when all of this is over, if this ever ends, we will be together again. So reuniting that family sort of feel, the home motif that is reoccurring. That is my only hope. My one wish upon a star. Again, referencing back to stars again. It is getting darker. I have to find some place to stay out of the cold. I'll head north. I'm sure I'll be able to find something there. Quickly before the sun sets. I do not want to get caught out in the snow and schmutz. So that is how it ends. He ends up making a decision to go and try and find somewhere where he can shelter. He has some new purpose to his life. He is going to survive, if only just to find them again at the end of the war. So he becomes hopeful towards the end. Now, every paragraph here has thoughts and feelings attached to it. So I want you to download this from the files section on Andy if you haven't done that already. And I want you to annotate on the side, what are the thoughts and feelings that are happening in each paragraph? I also want you to highlight all of the aesthetic features and stylistic devices. So I want you to highlight things like italicized words or sentence fragments or ellipses. I want you to annotate where you find similes and metaphors, so imagery. So, for example, she melted my frosty heart. I feel the sting of the snowball hitting my face. So, those sorts of things, so that you can see that this is consistent throughout, that, you know, this person here has worked really hard to incorporate aesthetic features, stylistic devices, your motif, your symbolism, your imagery throughout it. And this is why it was a 25. All right, so make sure you take the time to do that. You go through it. You even could label on the side past, present tense as well, and then you'll be able to see the structure a bit better. Okay, well, hopefully that helped you and you understand what your monologue should look like if you're looking for a decent grade. Thank you.